Hello, class. I am so excited to be back at Hogwarts. This is exciting. Today, I have to tell you, did you remember my name? My name is Professor Patricia Caulfield, and I do think I remember all of your names. Today, we are going to learn about the building blocks of life. I know, isn't that really exciting? So, first, let's think about a Lego, just a simple Lego. If I add more Legos and more Legos, some the same, some different, I can make just about anything. Well, that's what's going to be happening today with our building block of life. And we are going to show you. This is the cell. No, Harry, it's not the same kind of cell that Sirius Black was in, but it is just a small space. First scientists that saw cells named them that because they were just small spaces. So this is your building block of life. Now, it's not usually this big, so you can take this cell and you can put more cells, different cells, bigger cells, smaller cells together, and you can make just about anything. You can make a rat, or a cat, or an owl, or you, out of cells. Hermione, good question. How many cells do we have in the body? We have more than 40 trillion cells in your body. Oh, no, Ron, they're not all this big. This is just a model. I wanted to make it big so you could see all the parts. But no, they're really, really small. Well, how small? Let's take the lowercase letter I. The lowercase letter I, you have to put a dot on top. And in that dot, on top of that lowercase I, you could fit 10,000 cells in that little dot. Pretty small. Yes, we can't see them, but you can see them through a microscope. And yes, we're going to work with microscopes next week, and you are going to get to see some cells. So let's start with the outside of this cell. The outside of the cell is called the plasma membrane. And what do you think the membrane does? What do you think? Well, yes, absolutely. It keeps all of these pieces in place. And what else? Good, protection. It actually is a double layer, so it would have even more protection. So we need for substances to be able to come into the cell and give us nutrients, and maybe we have some waste that needs to come out. So think about the gate at Hogwarts, or think about the door at your house or at a friend's house. There are people that can come in and out whenever they want. Family, some friends, and they don't have to unlock the door, they can just come right in. Sometimes you need a little help bringing things into your house. The membrane does that same thing, this plasma membrane. There are substances that can come in and out very easily. The membrane is, we say it is semi-permeable. Semi? What does that mean? Well, not exactly half. It just means partially. So it's not just half, just partially. And what is permeable? Yes, Hermione. Yes, that's exactly right. It has some holes in it, so some things can come in and some things can't come in. Ron, no eye rolling. She had a good answer. All right, so some substances with the membrane can come in and out very, very easily. Very small particles, and there's no problem. Sometimes the particles get a little bit bigger. But the membrane is also selectively permeable. Yeah, it gets to choose. So those bigger molecules, those bigger substances, if it's something healthy and it wants to come in, and it's not too big, the membrane can do it with a little bit of a push. But let's say there's a very, very large substance, a very large particle or molecule that you want to come in because it's a healthy one, but it's too big. You're going to need some energy. You're going to need some power. Well, yeah, you could call Hagrid, but the membrane can take care of it by itself. But it does need energy and power, and it's called ATP. And that's what helps those larger substances come in. So we know what's going on the outside, but this outside is hard. The outside of an actual cell is made of fats and proteins. Yeah, it's kind of squishy. It also moves a little bit. It's like, yeah, a little bit like dancing. So let's check out what's inside this cell. All of this on the inside is called the cytoplasm. And the sticky kind of gel in here is called the cytosol. So the cytosol keeps everything in place, but it's not hard, so they can move around. What all of these structures in here are called are organelles. They all have a function. They all have to do their job, or the cell isn't going to survive. So it's important that they do their work. And all of you do all your work, right? I knew that. Okay, so we have the outside, which is our plasma membrane that we talked about. We have the cytoplasm, which is everything inside. And we have the cytosol, which is all the sticky gel that's in there. Now, let's talk about some of these organelles. The very largest one is called the nucleus. It's also really the most important one. The nucleus is the control center of the cell. It has all of the instructions, and it sends all of the instructions to the right place. So I guess at Hogwarts, Professor Dumbledore would probably be the nucleus of Hogwarts. Inside this nucleus is your DNA. And your DNA is all of your hereditary instructions to see whether you're going to have blonde hair or red hair or brown hair, or you're going to be tall or short, or you're going to be a boy or a girl. All of that is in your DNA, and that's where it's stored. Now, inside this nucleus, there's another organelle called a nucleolus. And it takes the DNA and it takes out specific instructions and it wraps them in a nice membrane, and it's called a ribosome. Now, I'm not going to put this in yet because I'm going to explain it first. Outside the membrane of the nucleus, and the membrane of the nucleus is called the nuclear envelope. Outside that nuclear envelope, there is another structure called the, wait for it, endoplasmic reticulum. And that will be on the spelling test next week. But we have a nickname for it. We call it the ER. So outside the nucleus and kind of attached to the nuclear envelope is the ER. But if you look at it, there are little black dots on there. That nucleolus makes those ribosomes. It makes the ribosomes with all of those instructions. And it goes out into the ER, the endoplasmic reticulum. Here's one over here. And some of them get stuck on the ER. So then we call it the rough ER, because now it's all bumpy. So those ribosomes will sit there until they're ready to go out and to give the instructions to all of the other organelles. Outside the rough ER is the smooth ER, right here. And that smooth ER doesn't have ribosomes, but it directs those ribosomes where they need to go. So you can see some of them are out in the cytosol already, and going to the organelles that need their instructions. Now, your endoplasmic reticulum, or your ER, is this complex system. There's another complex system over here. It is called the Golgi complex, and it is here. Now, the Golgi complex is kind of like the kitchen. It takes those ribosomes that were made in the nucleolus. It kind of chops them up, slices them, puts them with some carbohydrates, and it makes it into a little vessel, or vesicle, I guess you could say, that has a membrane around it. And it kind of shoots them out of the Golgi complex, and those new substances, part carbohydrate, part ribosome, are now in its own little space, but called the Golgi vesicle, waiting to be transported somewhere else. Now, sometimes in the cell, some of the organelles get worn out, or they don't operate like they should anymore, and they're kind of malfunctioning. And sometimes too many nutrients have gotten in the cell. It's a membrane, maybe you let too much in. So we have an organelle right here, and there's another one over here, called a lysosome. And it's sort of the garbage disposal of the cell. If there is an organelle that's not working well, the lysosome can move around and kind of digest that misfunctioning organelle, or all those nutrients that you don't need. And it has such strong enzymes in it that it can actually dissolve an entire cell that is maybe diseased or maybe just worn out. So it's very important. Oh, very good question. If sometimes cells get dissolved, how do we make new cells? Good question. This organelle, the centriole, is how we get new cells. They are over here, and what they do is, it's like kind of looks like you're picking teams. So the centriole is in the cell when it's time to make a new cell. They make all of the organelles line up right down the middle of the cell. And then there's one centriole on either side, and they're like a magnet. They start pulling those organelles apart. But the same amount, all of what's inside those organelles have to be on either side. And they pull, and they pull, and membranes form around all of those organelles. Well, the ones that had a membrane before. And then as they're moving to the side, the centrioles make sure that plasma membrane goes around both of those new cells, and you have two identical cells. Now this happens with your cells about once a day. So you have about 1 trillion cells. Not all of them are going to multiply, but that's a lot of new cells. So even though some cells are going to die or be dissolved, there are new ones being made all the time. So all of this has got to take power, right? I mean, this is a lot of energy that needs to happen with all of the organelles and all of these actions. Well, there is one more organelle we need to talk about, which is also extremely important. And wait for it, the mitochondria. No, sorry, it doesn't have a nickname. So this one will also be on the spelling test. This mitochondria, now how I remember it, I call it the mighty mitochondria, because it supplies all of the power and energy for the entire cell. Remember we talked about the plasma membrane, and it needed an energy called ATP to get those larger substances through the membrane? Well, this, the mitochondria, is where all of that ATP gets stored, gets developed and stored, and given out to all of the organelles in the cell so they can do their work. So, there you have your building block of life. Do you have any questions? Okay, I was so happy to be here and share with you. Now, I've left all of you a study notebook, which with all of the organelles and all of the functions of them all. And I also gave you some pictures because all cells don't look alike. There are about 200 different cells in your body. I didn't give you a picture of all 200, just the major ones. So that's in your study notebook, and we'll get to do microscopes, and yes, you will have a test next week. But thank you for letting me come back to Hogwarts, and I need to thank my great niece and nephew for inviting me into the Hogwarts world. Thank you very much. Goodbye.